And I think right now, obviously, with the coronavirus and the concern for developing a vaccine, I've heard about this already in the public sphere, in social media, and others where there are companies that are trying to use aborted, at least some of them are using aborted fetal tissue to try to develop a vaccine. And our bishops, some of them at least, have said, we need to not do this.
I think what we're facing is that various bishops in various dioceses throughout the United States kind of have a different tone as to how they approach this issue. And I would like to see more set guidance. And I feel like a lot of other bioethical issues of importance in the Catholic faith, there is set guidance. Now, of course, Catholics disagree. I mean, that's not something good, but they can disagree. There's plenty of quote unquote Catholics that believe that, well, abortion is just a woman's choice, but at least the church has very specific moral guidance. And I think for the vaccine issue, it's a little bit more complicated.
We've seen these videos more recently where it's very clear that they're selling aborted parts of babies to researchers. And this is just completely immoral. And should not be happening. And if it's connected to these vaccines, that also is just completely immoral. Even these doctors, these abortion doctors, they're making a lot of money off the abortion. And now they're taking the parts of the baby and selling them for a lot of money as well.
If you're a parent and your kid, is eligible of a certain age to get all these vaccines, you have a moral obligation to object. You should be, let's say, petitioning pharmaceutical companies. You should be seeing if there's an alternative vaccine available.
Money directs a lot of this. So think about just stem cell research, embryonic, synthetic, adult stem cells. If you don't think through these things, if you don't maybe care, or you're not very well educated as a scientist, to you it's all the same, you're going to go where you get funding from. And so if you're going to get funding to do embryonic, well, that's where you're going to go. If you get funding to do adult. And so what we need people to drive money towards and encourage towards adult stem cell research, towards, from bone marrow, we need for synthetic.
As far as, contacting companies directly, asking them to reconsider how they produce their vaccines. It's an interesting how advocacy goes. If 100 people did that, if there were 100 letters, that could make a big difference.
A lot of times you see this in the media, the Catholic Church is opposed to technology and advances and health. That's just not true at all. Right. We're opposed to killing people, right, who are created in the image and likeness of God. And using then those for scientific advancement. You cannot justify evil means because of a good end.
I would like to see more of the efforts of, okay, well, are we petitioning? Are we spreading the word about this? Are we advocating for vaccines that don't use aborted fetal cells? That's what I really would like to see in the church.
Not only are they using stem lines from the past, from aborted tissue, but in order to do their research, the experiments that they're doing actually involve using new fetal tissue. Right. And right now, for whatever reason, they don't have to report that because they're only using it, for the experiments. But the fact is they are using it, and they are using potentially many aborted tissue from many aborted babies to do these experiments.
I think in some ways our role as laity is actually more important and prominent than the role of the bishops in the hierarchy in this regard. I think primarily the bishops in the hierarchy are called to educate us, to catechize us on these matters, and to speak out as they can with witness. But we really need to be the ones speaking out and doing what we can. Bishops are not primarily the scientists working in the laboratories and working in these companies. Those are lay people.
There is objections, obviously, to these vaccines, but I'm not hearing them loud enough. I mean, even within Catholic circles, in terms of lobbying in New York State for Catholic interests, that is a concern that is raised, but could it be raised in a more stronger and forceful way? Perhaps, but, unfortunately, New York has gone in a direction that's not friendly to Catholic views. So obviously we as Catholics should be voicing our opposition, but I think, New York State governance and politics, we're kind of left, how are we navigating decisions that are not favorable to our moral beliefs?
But the people that actually have even more responsibility are at the corporate level, when they choose which vaccine their hospital is going to use. Because if they're choosing something ethical, then there shouldn't really be much of a problem. But if they're choosing an unethically produced vaccine which is primarily would be from fetal tissue, then there's a really big problem.
You should be objecting, whether that's to your legislators, whether that's to pharmaceutical companies, etc. You have to really make sure that if you're going to use these vaccines, you have a proportionate reason, and then really have to make an effort to seek out alternatives. More people that I wouldn't know about this issue are now starting to question, well, if there's going to be a COVID-19 vaccine, but those are going to, how is that going to be derived? Is it going to be derived using the aborted fetal line? So then that's an opportunity to have that conversation, and then that's an opportunity for Catholics to advocate for a vaccine, that's not using aborted fetal matter. In the end, the government's going to do what they want. But as Catholics, we do have an obligation to at least say that, I know I'm not comfortable with this. I think that this is wrong. If you want to have a vaccine, okay, that's fine, well and good. Maybe it will help a lot of people, but the end doesn't justify the means.